So today I have with me Mr Simon Butler. How you doing, my friend?
I'm not too bad, thanks. Bald and old and creaky, but otherwise still here.
Yeah, not in pain like me with back and hip injuries then.
No, not horrendously so. First thing in the morning, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially during the winter, you feel it in your joints and all that. But at the moment, not too bad.
I've got that to look forward to then, haven't I?
Oh, it's something to definitely look forward to. Yeah.
You're me. Right then, mate. So, first question I normally ask people is what was your first introduction to games?
Arcades.
It was arcades. Was that
Yeah.
through holidays and that kind of stuff?
I wouldn't go on record as saying it was on a holiday or anything like that. My parents were the kind of people who, no, fresh air, the beach, stay away from those noisy places. And the few memories I do have of, I don't know, were they called arcades when it was just um, pinball and one-arm bandits? I mean, and I'm talking the original
Yeah.
one-arm
Yeah.
bandits.
Maybe amusements. Maybe they were called
Yeah,
amusements.
the amusements.
Yeah.
But I'd say my first or the strongest memories of games was amusement arcades here in Liverpool, um, with the early machines, and also possibly even the tabletop pub machines.
Right. Yeah. Your cocktail
Yeah,
jobbies. Put your pint on and have a game of Space
yeah,
Invaders.
things like Phoenix and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought these look basic, because it was all just very blocky square graphics. Not that I had anything to gauge it against, but I just thought this looks very simplistic. This looks easy. And then, an hour later, when you've put every 10 pence you owned into
Yeah.
it and got nowhere, I thought, there's more to this than meets the eye. But I mean, it was just It was just something I liked. It was not something I thought this could be interesting as a job. I mean, that at no point did that ever occur. Not at all. Um, while I was playing these things, I don't think for a second I even thought, gosh, there must be people making these somewhere.
Mm.
I um, I mean, I just had round about that time. I just had a bog standard 9 to 5 job.
Yep.
I don't even remember sort of what year that would have been. Around about that time, I moved from job to job. Um, I'd do a couple of years at something and then think, I'm going to go to Europe forever, and then change my mind once I'd handed me notice in. Um,
Was this before uni?
oh Christ, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I left full-time education when I was 18,
Yeah.
after A levels,
Yeah.
and signed on the dole. Well, I was encouraged to sign on the dole
Mm.
by a school friend. He said, "Oh, have you signed on the dole yet? It's brilliant." He said, "You get paid money for doing nothing. Go down the dole, ask them for £75 a week. They won't have a job that pays that." He said, "So you'll get like 35. It's brilliant." He said, "It's brilliant." So I went down the dole the next day and said, "I'd like a job, please." And they said, "How much do you want to earn a week?" And I said, £75. And I went, oh, okay. Flick, 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 flick through the Rolodex. Would you work here? And I said, doing what? And he said, well, sort of this job. And I said, how much does it pay? And he said, £75 a week. And I went, yeah, okay. So then, a couple of weeks later, I bumped into the same school friend, and he said, did you go down the dole? And I said, yeah, yeah. He said, and what happened? I said, I'm working there. So that was it. For about 5 years, that was what I did. Back in the Boys from the Black Stuff days, when it was like a war zone when you opened the doors and they all came in. People who complain now, I mean, I've still got friends who work in the DWP.
There's security on the doors now, isn't there?
Now, God, well, the security, I mean, how salty am I allowed to go on this?
You go for it, mate.
Right.
You go for it.
The fucking security now, they all look like they've eaten two of the security men.
Yeah.
They're all fucking fat bastards.
Not stopping anything, are they?
No, Jesus Christ. If there was a kickoff in the Dole these days, the fight would be over before they got across the room.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm not saying the security men, well, we didn't have security men. We had a doorman who opened the door.
Yeah.
And he was an old World War II vet. He used to wear his medals on his uniform.
Yeah.
But even he couldn't stop the fight because he was so old. But these were, I mean, are you old enough to remember Boys from the Black Stuff? TV series? Probably not, if you have to think.
Yeah, if I've got to think about it now.
Well, it was during the 80s. It was written by Alan Bleasdale, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Alan Bleasdale, the guy that created Jesus, I can't even remember there was another soap set in there was a Scouse soap.
Oh, Brookside.
That's it. Brookie.
Yeah, so I'm old enough to remember Brookside.
Yeah, so he created hold on, you'll have to Google it. It's either Willie Russell or Alan Bleasdale.
Okay.
And it kind of, all that Harry Enfield, calm down.
Yeah, calm down. Yeah.
With the perms and the
yeah. Hey. Yeah.
Yeah, the footballers' moustaches. Well, it kind of came from that.
I see.
It was considered a black comedy. How the fuck did we get here from video games? And
it's okay. It's all good.
It set a precedent. Scousers were seen as shiftless, thieving ne'er-do-wells. And that was pretty much it. It won all kinds of awards. It made Bernard Hill a star, who, he then ended up in Lord of the Rings as Lord of the Rohan. But in Boys from the Black Stuff, he was known as Yozza Hughes, who would wander around endlessly saying, "Gives a job, I can do that," and headbutting people. So that was it. That was another thing. Scousers were thieving, shiftless, violent ne'er-do-wells.
Wow.
And that label, that stuck with a certain generation. Something that some would say I haven't tried to dissuade, but others would agree with me when I say I try to be anything but that cliched Scouser, especially with the accent. Because I went down to London and I was trying my hand at advertising and worked at places like Saatchi's and J. Walter Thompson, things like that. and you'd show your portfolio around, and I had two absolute wankers, two fucking. I mean, no, you couldn't say they're Cockney, because Cockney is sort of cheeky chappy, you know, sort of EastEnders type, but they were Londoners, snooty Londoners. And it was, so where are you from? I said, Liverpool.
Blimey.
Oh, gizzard job. I can do that. I say. And they just said, while they were looking at my portfolio, they said, give us an example of that inimitable Scouse wit that everybody has heard about. So I just zipped up my portfolio and just said, go fuck yourselves, and walked out. And I just thought, do you know what? But those were the Thatcher years, and I was a student working places in London, and students were expendable, you know, last in, first out. And it wasn't like you were 10 a penny. There were literally, I mean, you would walk through the door of an advertising agency with at least 5 or 10 other students, all with their portfolios, all looking for that one job. And as you were coming out, more of them would be coming in. And the streets of most of the agencies were just off Tottenham Court Road, round there. And you just see them walking around with the portfolio, and you just thought, fucking hell. I mean, the only thing I could think would be comparable would be the acting profession. You know, turning up to try out for a part, and there'd be 100 other people in the waiting room, and that's what it was like. You'd all be sat there, and they just say next, and in you went, and in you went. So that was pretty much the tail end of my real working career. Up until that point, I just kept doing jobs, getting fed up with them, find another job. After leaving the dole with nothing to go to, but I did find another job sort of within a couple of months, because back then, you know, young, eager kids who were prepared to work for absolutely fuck all, they got snapped up. So yeah, you know, I've worked places like the post office and the dole and the local council and whatnot in the sector.
Okay.
So yeah, you know, it's just.
And this is because you didn't have any clue of what you really wanted to do.
Back in the 70s, most people, I'd say most people didn't. It was just a case of you'd leave school. I left school with qualifications. I thought, right, that's it. I'm done with education. I've done primary school, grammar school, college, further education, O levels, A levels. That's it. And I thought, well, what you're supposed to do now is find a 9 to 5, and just pay your bills, maybe get a flat, maybe find a girlfriend, maybe settle down. So that was the vague, nebulous thing that I thought that I would wander into at some point. But again, Steve Kane, he was at college here in Liverpool, both him and his wife. And they said, why don't you apply for college and do an art degree, or go into art? You'll have to do a year at the College of Further Education and then go into the Polytech, which is now Liverpool University.
Was you interested in art though? Because it's all right somebody saying, why don't you do this? But if you've got...
Well, I'd always drawn all
Okay.
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was something that I did. I mean, if I was sat at home, parents in the other room watching the TV, I'd go in the front room, put some records on, get out the sketch pad and just draw. Um,
Mm.
but I never saw it. Well, that's not strictly true. Never saw it as a career. I always thought, oh, wouldn't it be great to be a comic book artist? Not knowing A, how to do it, and B, having the wherewithal to knuckle down and just draw and draw and draw and draw. And it's only in the last 20 years that I've come across people that I would call real artists who even just as, no, that's derogatory saying just as, even people who end up as concept artists or layout artists. And I've met one or two comic book artists in my time, and they draw every day. And they draw. It's strange. They sketch before they draw. They have a warm up just to warm their brains and their hands up. And I just thought, fucking hell. It wasn't a case of that looks too much like hard work. I just thought, Jesus Christ. And the people that I do know, they've got sketchbooks everywhere. The shelves are groaning with them. They're spending an absolute fortune on watercolors, gouache, oils, pencils, erasers, pencil sharpeners. It's just mental. And some of them are gainfully employed, and others, they find it hard. And especially now with the digital artists, but maybe that's something we'll talk about later. I admire digital artists immensely. I find them staggeringly and frighteningly talented. But there's just something about it that I think, well, we might as well get it out of the way now. I watch people doing, you'll see these time lapse of somebody doing a piece of artwork. So you'll see the end result first, and then you see how they started from a preparatory sketch, and they go through and they change things. And I just think, yeah, but everything is on a different fucking layer. It's all in Photoshop or some similar package. And you're grabbing elements, removing them, or grabbing an element and rotating it or flipping it. Can't do that on a piece of paper. How good would you be on a piece of paper? Would you be that talented on a piece of paper? The people that I see drawing on paper, the people that I see painting on canvas, I don't have more admiration for them, but they blow me away by they just go for it. They have this vision, this clarity of vision of what it's going to be, and they it's like almost being a sculptor,
Yeah.
They know that there's a statue inside that block of marble or whatever, and they just have to reveal it. Whereas digital artists, I do to this day, I do wonder if they would just be as good if all of a sudden, or if their client said, well, I don't want it drawn on a computer, I want you to draw on paper. Some of the people that I know, I see their sketchbooks and I know that they are that good. But when I see these time lapse things, and I just think, you've just taken his head and like flipped it the other way, or you've, all his clothes are on a different layer, and you've like tweaked this, but it's actually behind several other layers. Would you be capable of doing that if it were on a canvas? So, but as I say, we've got miles away from the topic. But
no, it's still interesting though.
no, I liked drawing. I do like drawing. I find it painful now. Actually holding a pencil for 10, 15 minutes hurts. I find it easier to draw. I don't know whether, that's my excuse. Oh, I use a mouse. I find it painful to draw with the stylus. But I don't do digital art very much, unless it is 1 pixel at a time. But all the way back, all of that aside, yeah, so Steve Kane said, why don't you go to college? So I went to my local college and did 1 year of 2. And then I was asked not to come back one day because, I wasn't the only one, but I was the ringleader. We were on we were on the 9th floor, and we thought it would be amusing to fill an industrial strength bin bag with as much water as we could.
Oh, okay.
And then push it out the window. And
big water bomb.
Yeah, well, it didn't hit anyone.
Oh, that's okay then.
It didn't even get close to hitting anyone. But it almost cracked the concrete. It did make up a mark on the concrete when it went, and it did go off like a bomb. So yeah, so art school finished sooner than I expected, but I found gainful employment in a heartbeat. I ended up working in some dead-end job in the local council, sorting out the architect's department and all their drawings when they moved from one office to another. And then I applied to Liverpool Polytech, and I got in, but I just missed that year. So I had another dead-end job working in the local census office. And they were 2 great years. I was earning silly money. Steve was at Poly spending his student grant and getting up to his neck in debt.
In debt, yeah.
Yeah. And by this time, he had what? 1 child and 1 on the way, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, I was living the life of Riley, soft bastard Simon Butler. I had more money than I knew what to fucking do with. So, so I was like, I don't know, sort of, let's see, I was 21. So yeah, I was late teens, early 20s when I finished my first stint of art, and then trod water for 2 years, and then started at Liverpool Poly in 1981. And in pretty short order time, I decided I didn't want to go into graphic design, even though the course, the whole course was graphic design. But right. I didn't want to specialize in graphic design, which is, sort of layouts for magazines and font design and packaging design and all the other intricate ramifications involved in graphic design.
Well, it goes hand in hand with advertising, doesn't it? So,
well, yeah. So we only dipped into advertising towards the end of the first year, and I also decided didn't want to do photography. I enjoyed it, but I hated the darkroom work, and nobody really realised that digital cameras were around the corner. But all that, I liked being in the darkroom. That was fun. I enjoyed developing the photos. I fucking hated trying to get film on the reel.
Right. Okay.
Develop the film. Oh, I had shit hand-eye coordination, especially in a room with zero light whatsoever. So you're there in the dark, just doing things by touch. And I was fucking awful at it. So I thought, no, not photography. The idea of animation intrigued me, but after talking to my tutor, it was, even he knew it was a dying industry in the UK. You know, you would struggle to be an independent animator doing your own stuff. Fine art was across in the other building. I had no time for the fine artists. They were just a bunch of fucking posers, you know, stripping off down to their underpants, burying their head in sand and calling it man's inhumanity to man. I just thought, fuck off. You bunch of dickheads, you know. But real fine art, people, you know, I mean, Steve Kane was doing fine art, and as good an artist as he was, there were people there who were frighteningly talented. I mean, like
Photo quality.
oh yeah, there were a couple there who did photorealist paintings, and as much as even to this day, I admire the hand-eye skills, but I think even back then, before digital cameras, I just thought, what's the fucking point? What is the point? Because back in the 80s, the early 80s, there were things, all this kind of art was very popular. There were photorealist pictures of Coke cans with moisture on them, Harley Davidson motorbikes, Les Paul guitars, all the kind of trappings of the rock and roll lifestyle, the West Coast lifestyle. And I just thought, someone spent 6 months painting that, and yet you can go click. Didn't see the point. But seeing somebody do an oil painting of, I mean, could be anything, you know, just could be their shoe, and it doesn't necessarily need to be photorealistic. It just looked like a shoe, but you could see the creases in the leather, you could see the wear in the laces, and you just think, fucking hell, they've done that with a paintbrush and paints. How talented is that? I mean, one of the girls there, what was her name? Yvonne Gilbert. Now, a lot of people won't know her name. Excuse me. But people from a certain era or with a certain predisposition towards 80s music, she did design the cover, one of the most famous 12-inch record covers of that era for Relax by Frankie Goes to Hollywood.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And she's still painting to this day, and I'd recommend anyone check out Yvonne Gilbert. Check out her work. I mean, she did a series of stamps for one Christmas, sort of traditional religious nativity stamps, and they were beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And she does them all in, as far as I know, it's colored pencil. She was a genius, absolute genius, still is. So yeah, people like that impressed me. So I knew I enjoyed art school. I knew that I was going to do something while I was there, 3 years I was there. But it was only the last part of my first year, and guys from the advertising, sort of, did you watch Mad Men, the TV series?
No.
Well, you should.
Okay.
It shows the New York side of the advertising industry back in the late 60s. And yeah, it was, whether or not it was, all the guys came in, and they were predominantly men. But when I finally wound up during every summer holiday, instead of just dicking around, well, when I was at art college, that's 6 weeks. I'd do 6 weeks in an advertising agency. And yeah, it was kind of rock and roll, and it was fast and it was interesting, and you had to think on your feet. And I couldn't make my mind up. Did I want to be an art director? Did I want to be a copywriter? They both presented interesting challenges. So I did a little bit of both. Didn't really specialize. So 3 years went by, and then we're coming up to what month is it now? September. Yeah, I think next month. It's either, I can't actually remember the month now, and sadly, there's no one around to ask. Steve's gone. Dave Lawson's gone from Imagine. I know Steve Blower was there at the time, but I don't think I met him. Yeah, I think I did actually. Right. So what happened was there was an advert in the local paper, the Liverpool Echo, and I think it was, I don't know, a friend said, "Simon, have you seen this? Artists wanted for computer games." And already I had encountered the arcades, and I spent way too much time and far too much money and bored the living crap out of the girlfriend I had at the time by forcing her to stand alongside me, while I smoked endless cigarettes and, I thought I was impressing everybody with my pathetic skills at, Pong or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, I looked at this advert and I pointed it out to my girlfriend. I said, "Look at this." And she said, "Look, it's like this. You've got until next June, and then you're finished. Your degree is finished, and you'll actually have something of value under your belt. You know full well," and she was right, "you know full well your parents think you're an absolute washout, because you've never achieved anything." My sister was married with children, and she had a good job, and her husband was part of the round table, or it's, the Masons, blah blah blah, all that fucking bollocks. And I just seemed to be bouncing around, aimless.
Were you the black sheep?
Very much so. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, because I hadn't knuckled down. I hadn't followed my father into his trade, or come out of school and found a job and was still in it 10 years later. I'd done this, done that, been here, gone there. and I'd not suffered because of it. You know, I wasn't in debt. I wasn't.
You're still earning money though, weren't you? So
Yeah, I was still earning. You
mm.
know, I just hadn't found a direction. And even while I was at the poly, I made sure. Yes, I did have a student grant, and yes, I went vastly beyond my student grant, and yes, I got. Right, because the thing is, at that time, I was in the. What I didn't realize was when I entered college, I was entering the twilight years of a long relationship. I'd been with a girl for 6 years.
Oh wow, okay, that's pretty
Um,
serious.
and it was only at the end of the first year when I I found another girlfriend. And for a while, I sort of juggled the two. Um,
You stood you.
not necessarily, no, not necessarily. It was just, I don't know. It was just, I had my home life, which, and I had my student life, and never the twain shall meet, and they never did. And my 6 year girlfriend showed no interest in meeting anyone from art school. Um, and my art school girlfriend um, knew all about my 6 year girlfriend. And then one day, um, sort of threw down the gauntlet and just said, "You're never going to commit to anyone." So I finished with the 6 year girlfriend. But that was after 7 years. Um, but anyway, so this new girlfriend, who probably had more patience with me than anyone up until I finally met my wife, she actually, as I said, she said, "Look, right, you've got six months or so before you finish your degree course. Your parents think you're some kind of non-committal idiot who'll never achieve anything. Prove them wrong. And if this company is any good, if this computer industry, if these video games take off, this company will still be around when you get your degree." So I thought, she may have something there. So I just thought, well, what shall I do with this information about this job? So I told Steve Kane, not realizing that that particular chain of events would change my life forever. By turning down the opportunity to apply for this job, well, by listening to sage advice from my girlfriend at the time, and then telling Steve about this job, what happened was Steve Kane went to Imagine. I suppose you guessed that's who it was. Um, Became their art director and set up the art department um, in Old Hall Street at Imagine's first office. About a month later, he um, called my house, or my parents' house. I was still living at home, um, and said, "I've got a job for you. I want you to come in." And I was already going into the office anyway. Steve told me where it was, and I used to just wander across Liverpool and go and annoy him for an hour or so. And so I went round to his house that night, asked him what it was, and he said, look, we've got a game and we've got no one to do. And I can't remember, I think it was the Dragon version. There was one conversion that they needed doing, and they needed it doing fast. And I just said, well, do you think I can do it? He said, fucking easy, son. He said, honest to God. He said, the fucking monkeys can do this job. He said, there's nothing to it. And I just said, okay. So I asked him what kind of money I should ask for. And he said, ask him for $3,000. Because I said, well, how long, when's it got to be done? He said, it's got to be done in 3 days. He said, all the other versions are going off to be duplicated. It's got to be done in 3 days. So I said, oh, okay. So I went in the next day, met up with, I think, Dave Lawson and Mark Butler, who was more interested in the fact that we shared the same name. Yeah,
I was just going to say, was there any relation? But yeah,
no. I mean, it is, you know, it is strange that, what's his name, Charlie, who wrote Black Mirror?
Oh, cross, yeah, Charlie. It's not Bridger, is he?
Brooker.
Brooker. Yeah.
Yeah, I did find it odd that there were two characters in Bandersnatch. One of them was called Simon, and another one had the surname Butler.
Yeah.
Little
Easter eggs.
Little Easter eggs. I mean, there was another Easter egg where the boss of the company was showing someone around and said, "Oh, you'll have to excuse the mess. It's just boxes everywhere, but it's going to be, we're getting desks, and it's going to be very professional. Imagine what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
Just imagine." But they just said, "When can you start?" I said, "Now." They said, "How much do you want?" I said, $3,000. And that was the worst mistake I ever fucking made, because the next comment was, "Is that all?"
Really? Oh, man. Okay.
Well, that cavalier attitude was their undoing. You know, Bruce, that fucking idiot Bruce Everest, who says, it was schoolboy piracy that killed Imagine. Fucking rubbish. Absolute fucking rubbish. And somebody the other day suggested treating the staff like rock stars brought about their downfall. Not treating them like rock stars, but paying them. Well, actually, they weren't even being paid like rock stars, because rock stars back then, back in the 80s, they lived
in a van.
They lived high on the hog. But if you actually talk to them now and say, well, how much were you physically earning back in the 80s? They were earning fuck all. So we were probably earning more than rock stars. They were living on the never, never, you know. They were earning money that they were going to have to pay back years from now. Whereas, you know, I walked in and asked for $3,000, and they just said, okay, or is that all? And that was for 3 days' work, and I finished in 2, doing Pedro. And when I asked for my money, I asked for it in cash, because I don't know, I just didn't trust them. And also, I another major reason was I didn't dare put £3,000 in my bank account. It would have disappeared into my overdraft, and I would have done those 2 days' work for nothing. I mean, I left college with a 15 grand overdraft in 1984.
In 1984 as well.
Yeah, I don't know how much that's worth now.
It's got to be, Christ, 80 grand maybe. I don't know.
Probably.
It's got to be, hasn't it? Jesus
Yeah.
Christ.
But working in, the next couple of years, working in the industry, that was paid off. That was paid off easily.
Well, with that kind of money flying around, yeah, no
Well,
wonder.
no, I mean, I never earned. I never had 2 days where I earned cash like that ever again.
I see.
I've not done badly. I've never been. I was going to say I've never been shortchanged. I have actually, and sadly, it was always by Steve Kane, but it wasn't him shortchanging me. It was his clients, the likes of fucking Atari and people like that. All of a sudden, Steve and John Gibson and Kenny, they'd be like the top dogs. They'd come to you and say, well, Atari haven't paid, or we can only pay half salary this month. Something my wife took great exception to, and would never actually accept the fact that it wasn't Steve's fault. Well, he should have seen it coming. I suppose he should, really, or there should have been some clause written in. But the people I worked for, small indie teams, they were the ones that tended to drop the ball. The likes of working for Virgin or Ocean, people like that, you knew you were going to get paid at the end of the month. You would have got paid even if you sat on your ass and done no fucking work, which some people did. But I enjoyed working with Steve. It was always, you always felt as though you were flying by the seat of your pants. But yeah, so I did Pedro, got paid, finished my art course, got my degree. Kind of went like that to my parents, because we didn't really have a very good relationship ever.
Okay.
And off I went down to London to work in advertising, which lasted all of a year, if that. I kept doing other things.
Was that because of was that because of your degree and you thought that's what I'm going to do now?
Well, I don't think it was even a year. It was like 6 months, I think. London was, I had enough to live on. And even though I still had my overdraft. And I was living in South Kensington. But our flat was underground. Maybe that prepared me for Ocean Software, I don't know. And I was bouncing from one agency to another, and we can hire you for a couple of weeks. We can hire for a couple of weeks. We can hire for a couple of days. And like I said earlier, it was the Thatcher years, so nobody was being snapped up and given a hard and fast permanent contract. So on one of my visits, or I think I just phoned home just to say, let the folks back home know I was still alive.
Yeah.
And I think my dad said, Steve Kane wants to talk to you. He's left a message. So I phoned him, and he told me that Imagine had gone belly up. And he told me that they had set up a new company, Denton Designs, and they needed pixel pushers. So again, my girlfriend at the time, she said, look, go and work, and then when you come home, you know, so home being London at that point, you can still pop home for a couple of days and take your portfolio around. So I was doing that, and I did that for a year, I think, during which time I had worked at Denton's, annoyed Karen Davis, one of the directors, to the point where I was asked to leave, which didn't bother me at all because at least I lasted longer than Ian Weatherburn, because he was asked to leave a company that he helped set up, Denton Designs, on his first day. So Steve just said, Simon, you know, you're driving Karen up the wall. I said, I know, it's intentional. Because we never got on, we never liked each other. So Steve said, hold on a minute. So he made a phone call. He said, just wait. About half an hour later, car pulls up, BMW pulls up, and there's Ian Weatherburn. So we go off somewhere to have coffee, and he said, I'm doing these games. I need a pixel pusher. I said, oh, okay. We agreed on a salary. And that was it then. I was in the games industry. And I still didn't realize it. But things had got tense between my girlfriend and I. Long distance, love affair and all that.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
Doesn't work.
No.
And me being an absolute gobshite, as some people would say, I wasn't making life easy. So that went the way of all flesh. I was back in Liverpool full time. And I just thought, because I was still working on my portfolio and I was still going down to London, even though I was now single. I was going down and trying out in advertising. But every time I went down, I was less and less interested. I had less and less enthusiasm about it. And I just, and all I was thinking about pretty much was, I've got pixels to push when I get back. I can't, you know, I want to get back. Even though I was going down, staying at mates' houses in London, I found myself talking less and less to them about advertising, talking more about computer games. And so I went back and I just thought, oh, fuck it. I can't be asked. I mean, my portfolio is still sitting upstairs now, collecting dust. But I was working with Ian, and we worked together on Never Ending Story. Then I decided to leave the industry again and go back down to London. And on my last day, Ian contacted me and said, sorry, Ian contacted me via Steve Kane again and said, can you do the Atari version of Never Ending Story? I said, I'm going to London tomorrow. He said, well, can you do it? And I said, okay. So I bled him dry over that one. And I did the entire graphic set in, I think it was 7 hours. And that was it. I thought, done now, done. And didn't go down to London. I just sort of stopped in my tracks and thought, what shall I do? And so I was talking to Steve a couple of nights later. He said, Ian's got loads more work. So I said, well, "Oh, tell them I'm available." So then we used the same graphics engine, or the same game engine, and we did Hunchback the Adventure. Then we did Batman the Adventure, and we finished it. And that has disappeared into the ether with Ian. We submitted it to Ocean. They liked it. We got paid for it. And it was just never released because they had John Rittman's Batman, and they didn't want people to think they were somehow connected. So
That was the isometric one, wasn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
So we then did an original game, Nomad. And by the end of Nomad, Ian and Steve had come up with the idea of setting up a company. So they set up something called Frames. And then I moved in there. And now I'll ask you to, I'll let you ask your second question after an hour.
That's brilliant. Mate, you've made my my job so much easier. I'll have you on again.
Yeah, it's not get me to ask questions, it's get me to fucking shut up. That's the difficult part.
That's all right. If I have to make this a two-parter, then so be it. Brilliant. But I've got to try and fit these in somewhere now, and try and remember what we've gone over. So while all this was going on, what home computer did you have? What was your first? So you didn't. Right. Okay. So you were just literally sat down at whoever you were working for, and what piece of software were they giving you? Was it a package or?
Pedro.
That's BBC, isn't it?
Yeah, I was given a BBC and I was given a Dragon, I think, and I was also given sheets of graph paper that had the graphics on. So I was running the BBC game version to see what the graphics looked like on screen, and then I would look at the sprites there. And the reason Steve had said a monkey can do this was all I had to do was type the graphics in on the Dragon. 1000111000 return 10. It was just like it wasn't like writing. It was more like sort of almost like working a loom. You know, you'd thread something across and then and move down a line or up a line.
But you planned it all on graph paper.
So you were plotting in each line of a sprite, and then saving them, and then you'd load them into this piece of software and see the animation run. And most of the reason that I got the job done in 2 days was I didn't make many mistakes, because there weren't that many mistakes to make. As long as you stayed true to the blank and the pixel and the blank and the pixel and the blank and the pixel, as long as you didn't get that wrong, or you'd miss a line and go down a line, 2 lines instead of 1, which I did once or twice, then it was a cakewalk. It was easy. So that piece of software didn't even have a name. That was just the editor.
That's in-house.
In-house. So because at that point there was, as far as I know, when Imagine first started, there were no off-the-shelf editors, because it was still early days in the industry. So I don't think Melbourne House even knew that this industry was going to last long enough to warrant having a graphics editor. But by the time, and I think I did Transformers on the 64, for Denton's. Terrible game, but their most financially successful title ever. By the time, so when I did that, obviously I was using some in-house Denton's editor. Again, a nameless thing. But by the time I was working for Ian, you had things like Koala Pad for the 64 and Melbourne House for the Spectrum. And then there was another graphics editor. I can't remember what it's called now. Maybe it was just called the editor or something. Or no, yeah, something daft like that. And I think I only used that twice in my entire life. This other piece, because Melbourne House didn't have a fill command. So if you wanted to fill a large area, you had to like drag. You had to like hold down one of the cursor keys and the plot key and make the pixel move to the end, and it wouldn't go down a line automatically. You'd have to sort of press return and make it go down. It was painful. But this other editor had a fill command, which we thought was like, oh my God, it was earth changing.
Yeah.
But Melbourne House on the Spectrum I used extensively, and I loved it. Used it for many years. Koala Pad was great, but the actual Koala Pad, the actual pad itself, was shit. Because after a while, and I mean a very short while, you would put the stylus on the pad where you wanted it on screen, and it would bounce somewhere else.
Oh, the calibration was all.
Oh, it was terrible.
Stiff. Yeah.
So by the time I ended up at Ocean, I said, somebody was asking, they said, well, here's this editor that we use. And I said, that's fucking horrible. I said, it's got like no fucking commands. It's just awful. Well, what do you use? I said, Koala Pad. Now, I can't remember who it was, but somebody, some clever boffin at Ocean got the Koala Pad software, ripped into it, and configured it so that it would work without the pad, and it would work with the joystick.
Oh, wow, okay.
So you had the commands on screen,
mm-hmm.
and you just did that, and it was a thing of beauty. And then that was put aside later on. There was a guy there, another one that we've lost far too early, a guy called Alan Short, and he was 64 guy, and his editor, he had a sprite editor and a map editor, a tile editor, and eventually he combined them both, and it worked with joystick, and it just became known as Short Ed, and it was fucking gorgeous. It was really, really amazing to work with. What people were using, they varied it. By the time, I think I used sort of off-the-shelf stuff while I was at Frames doing, the laughable things like It's a Knockout and Highlander and stuff like that. But by the time I reached Ocean, you'd move from project to project, and every project would have a different coder, and every coder would want you to use their software. And that kind of slowed things down, which was why someone, probably Gary Bracey, had the wisdom to suggest, wouldn't it be better if we had one in-house tool that all the 64 artists used? Because moving to another project on another coder's software, well, there's a week dead with nothing being produced while you wade through some fucking printout, that's as thick as your head. And you're like, okay, so I've got to hold down Control and press X while spinning round in my chair and saying Thursday, never on a Friday, and the pixel will appear, and you just think, fuck off, let's use Alan's editor. And yeah, he amended it shitloads to the point where you were putting high-res overlays on sprites, and it was fantastic. It really, really was. But there weren't. I can't, other than Koala Pad, I can't remember any other 64 off-the-shelf art software, and I sure as hell can't remember what the hell I used on the Amstrad, and I did loads of stuff on the Amstrad, but I can't remember what the software was. But I know that it was fun, it was usable, because if somebody said we need you to do something on the Amstrad, I'd just fly. And
I hear that a lot about the Amstrad. I hear that a lot about the Amstrad, how good it was to use.
It was, yes, it's the poor relation to the other two, the Johnny come lately. And I think the fact it had that huge fucking clunky, first of all, the green monitor, which was no fucking use whatsoever to game developers. Not of our ilk anyway. But I mean, the monitor weighed a ton. It was like, I don't know, it was about 10 car batteries tied together. You were lumping this thing around.
Easy.
And the actual keyboard, it just felt shit. It felt, even at the time, and I love the Amstrad, I really do. I mean, I love all three of them. And none of them were super professionally made. None of them look. I mean, I know that people say, "Oh, yeah, my Spectrum looks sexy, and my bread bin looks sexy, and all this," but really. But the Amstrad, out of all three of them, whatever plastic it was made of, it just looked fucking woeful. You'd sort of poke it, and it just, I don't know, but doing graphics on it was brilliant. There was high-res mode and multicolor mode. And I just thought the colors on the Amstrad like sang when you looked at them. They
more vibrant.
Oh, Jesus, yeah. I mean, they were still double width, which made things fucking painful. Which is why, people say, which machine do you prefer? And for realism, I'd have to say the Spectrum, because what you did in pixels always looked closer to what you would sketch on paper. You'd sketch something on paper and you'd say, "Oh, I want it to look like this," and then you do it in the 64 and everything's super wide, with no fucking detail. And it's only, that's why I used high-res overlays on certain levels on Combat School, because I saw them. My brain couldn't understand what I was looking at when I saw, I think, Odin Software. They had a game called Heartland.
Oh, the animation on that was stunning. Yeah, I remember Heartland. Yeah.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. It looked like it at the time. When you look at it now, it's cute.
Hmm.
It's cute. It's not a million miles away from um, it. Well, it's pretty much the walk animation is, I'd say, is exactly the same as Nodes of Yesod and Arc of Yesod.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
And the only thing that's different is when he throws his top hat,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But when I saw the 64 version, I thought, what the fuck's going on here? Where, where, where's the huge double wide, soft edged, sort of house brick sized pixels? What am I looking at? And then somebody told me that they are there, but the reason that there's no backgrounds is that everything's nice and black to hide the high res overlays. The sprite, there's sorry, these almost spectrum sprites on top of the Commodore 64 sprites.
I've got you. Yeah. They used
So
to use a similar technique with later Spectrum games, didn't they? To
yeah,
stop
well,
color clash kind of thing. Is that what you mean?
kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
They'd have the attribute clash and the big thick black outline going
Yeah.
round. But I thought that was dark magic. I thought it was
Yeah.
awesome,
Yeah.
absolutely awesome. And not enough games used it, um, but yeah. So I used one or two off the shelf tools, but then working for Ocean, the in-house tools were originally, as I've said, different from one coder to another, but after a while they became uniform. Um, and then along came the 16-bit machines.
Yeah. Which I was going to say. Yeah. So the 16-bit machines came. So did you use the D paint on the Amiga at all, or?
Right. I by that time, because if I remember rightly, after another 20 minutes on your second question, um,
It's all good, mate. As long as
uh,
you've got the time.
I I had when the 16-bit days came along, I finally acquired my first computer, the first computer that I ever owned, because I never owned any of the 8-bit machines. Um, because I was like gun for hire, I would either go to, um, so I went to Imagine and I was given a Dragon to work on, right? And a BBC to reference from.
Hmm.
I left Imagine, they stayed there. I went to Denton's, I was given a Commodore 64 to work on. I left Denton's, that stayed there.
Yeah.
Then I started working from home for a while for Ian Weatherburn. And I was given an Amstrad Spectrum and a Commodore 64. On my first project for Ian, I needed the Commodore 64 to reference the graphics for the Never-Ending Story. They'd been done by Steve Kane. So I would just, I can't remember, I think it might have been Koala Pads. So I would load up every image of Steve's and then using either Melbourne Draw or whatever the hell it was on the Amstrad to see copying stuff from the 64 to the Amstrad was fairly easy because you just copied it pixel for pixel, right? Because they were all double wide pixels. Didn't matter. But doing stuff double wide and downsizing to single pixels, I just threw pretty much everything Steve had done out of the window and did my own set of graphics. I think they were the first set of graphics I did on Neverending Story was the Spectrum version. And then in the fullness of time, I'd end up working at Ian's house in the south of Liverpool. And then he moved way north out of Liverpool. I was working at his house there. And so Ian, being the strange little thing that he was, he had a room at the back of his house that was his workroom, and all Ian needed. So Ian had a Spectrum Commodore and an Amstrad, and they were his to code on. And I had Spectrum Commodore and Amstrad, and they were mine to do the graphics on. And we pretty much sat side by side at these long tables. And I just, what do you think? Changes. Is this okay? Yeah, save it. And that was it. And that was our working relationship. We didn't talk much because Ian wasn't much of a conversationalist or much of a human being, really. Loathsome little weasel. But I was the only one that could pretty much tolerate him for 8 hours a day. But he paid top dollar. He was a hard taskmaster, but I was prepared to suck it up as long as I got paid. Then, like I say, I never owned any of these machines, even when I so I went to work for Steve and Ian, and because they were setting up a company, so in our art department we had me, Dawn Jones, Dawn Drake. Dawn Jones was Denton Design. Martin Calvert, two other guys there were two other seats, and artists came and went. So we'd have, let's say we had one machine each. So we'd need 15 Spectrums, 15 64s, and 15 Amstrads. And that's just for the graphics department. Downstairs, you would have people specializing. We had the likes of Chris Pink, who was an Amstrad coder. You'd have Steve Calvert, who was a Specky coder. Roy Gibson, who did a little bit of everything. So he'd have one of each. So the office would be full of machines, none of which were mine. And like I say, it was only when, what was I working on? For some reason, I have no memories at all why I bought an Atari ST. Okay. I had an Atari ST at home, and I developed all of my graphics for the Addams Family on that.
Oh, yeah.
And I used Degas, which was a great piece of software. And I love the ST because, again, it's one of these machines where the pixels were really crisp. You could see every individual pixel. It was brilliant. And the only shit part about Degas was you couldn't do animation. But you could have, I think it was either 7 or 8 screens open at once on top of each other or in memory. So what I would do was I would draw my sprites. Each frame of my sprite would be, trying to get this right, there, the top left of my monitor screen would be the first frame. And then I would press the function key, F2, to get to the next screen. And I would paste that frame in and then draw over it.
That makes sense, yeah.
Frame 2. And then I go F1, F2. and you'd see 2 frames. And it got a bit harder as you went along. But in the end, when you had full animation, I just run the finger along the function keys and you'd see the animation. And that was how I did it. There was still no, because I wasn't using Deluxe Paint. And even, unless I'm mistaken, Deluxe Paint 1 didn't have animation. I think it was Deluxe Paint 2, or was it?
I think Deluxe Paint 2 had animation. I only remember Deluxe Paint on the Amiga, so I can't.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So, and I had a machine, so getting an Amiga at the same time just seemed pointless. But then, for some reason, Ocean said, "Oh, Simon, we want this done on the Amiga. So, it's got more colours." So I said, "Oh, okay." So I started using the Amiga, and then got myself all confused because D-Paint. Not that Degas was dumb, but D-Paint was all singing, all dancing, and I've never been one to read manuals, so I was just making things up as I went along.
Winging it.
Yeah, or asking people, what key do you press for this function? And they'd tell me, and so I kind of got a smattering of knowledge of D-Paint, and then I fell in love with D-Paint, but I still hated the Amiga. Fucking hated it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, for the most pathetic reason.
Go on.
I hated the noise it made when it was loading. I
Oh,
hated
the drive noise.
Oh, I hated it.
Yeah.
It sounded like you had a goose or something stuck in the hard drive.
Yes.
It just irritated the fuck out of me. I was like, oh God.
You can even have that noise. I don't know if you've ever tried it, but on WHD load, the emulator for a PC, you can actually tick something to have
no
sampled.
No,
Yeah,
never in a million years. No.
Yeah.
No, it's like, and I think and it was probably Psygnosis that really sort of hammered my hatred for that honking goose noise. Because you had to load the CGI intros before you could load the game, and they took fucking lifetime to load. So you'd be sat there listening to this fucking goose honking away inside your Amiga.
I never thought of it that way.
God. But no, I mean, and I ended up having an Amiga briefly. I know that I was loaned an Amiga to do the Amiga version of Manic Miner by Tommy. Yes.
Okay.
So we'll end there, and you can come in with a question 3.
You've answered most of my questions for the first section anyway.
Have I?
You have, yeah.
Okie dokie.
Okay.
I'll make another cup of coffee.
Cool.